Human existence, a finite experience nested within the infinite cosmos, is perpetually shaped by three incessantly interacting and mutually redefining pillars: time, technology, and consciousness, forming a complex woven tapestry where every thread influences the entire structure. And only when we pause to look deeply into this nexus can we hope to understand our own nature and the trajectory of humanity. Time is not merely a linear physical concept measuring the passage of events from the past through the present to the future, but also a fluid cognitive construct, bent and adjusted by the human brain, where a moment of suffering can stretch into eternity, and a chain of joyful occurrences can pass in a blink, making the personal experience of time entirely subjective, profoundly different from the steady, clockwork flow of the universe where every second is a non-negotiable unit. And it is precisely in the gap between physical time and perceived time that technology has emerged and evolved, constantly seeking to compress, expand, record, or even transcend the limitations that time imposes on organic life. From the rudimentary tools used for hunting and farming, which helped humanity escape the shackles of daily survival and freed up time for contemplation, to the supercomputers and global information networks of the modern era, which allow the transmission of ideas and data almost instantaneously across all time zones and physical distances, fundamentally restructuring the speed and scope of social and economic interaction, while radically changing the way our consciousness operates and self-perceives. Because as information travels at the speed of light, patience becomes a rare commodity. The ability for deep concentration is eroded by the continuous intrusion of notifications and the non-stop stream of data, and the individual self, once an entity anchored in the physical world and local community, is now fragmented and dispersed into a multitude of digital identities, tracked, analyzed, and shaped by algorithms we can barely comprehend. This technological acceleration has compelled consciousness to adapt, shifting from a deep mode, slow reading, contemplation, deliberate learning, to a broad mode, rapid information scanning, multitasking, immediate reaction. And this change is not just behavioral, but neurological, as our brain, a wonderfully adaptive organ, is gradually being rewired to prioritize rapid context switching over sustained focal attention, creating a new generation of consciousness that is more connected than ever to global knowledge, but risks being disconnected from the inner stillness and emotional depth necessary for true empathy and understanding. Furthermore, technology does not merely alter how we experience time, but also challenges the very nature of memory. Because with the advent of seemingly infinite digital storage, the ability to recall details is no longer an essential survival skill, and instead, our memory shifts from the role of a storage vault to that of a search engine, where we remember the location of information rather than the information itself, creating a phenomenon known as the Google effect, in which the boundary between personal memory and digital collective memory becomes blurred. And this very ambiguity raises profound questions about the nature of personal identity. For if our memories are largely stored and accessed externally, what part of consciousness is truly our own? And what part is a detachable extension of the tool we utilize? Moreover, while time continues its onward march, technology is striving to reverse or mitigate its effects. Through the development of biotechnology and molecular medicine, humanity is pursuing the ancient aspiration of immortality, or at least a significant extension of the human lifespan, an objective that, if achieved, would generate the most far-reaching consequences for every social, economic, and ethical structure we know, since the extension of life would change the very value of time and the meaning of living a life, causing successive generations to live alongside each other for much longer periods, creating new tensions between novelty and tradition, while forcing consciousness to confront a future where death is no longer a certain destiny within a predicted time frame, but rather a potentially avoidable technical failure. This confluence is also evident in the field of artificial intelligence, AI, where technology is not just a tool, but a potential partner in the evolution of consciousness, with large language models, LLMs, capable of processing, synthesizing, and generating information at a scale and speed that human consciousness cannot match, challenging the traditional definition of intelligence and creativity, and posing the philosophical question of the possibility for machines to achieve true sentience. A breakthrough point that, if it occurs, would forever alter humanity's place in the cosmos, transforming us from the sole conscious entity to one of many forms of intelligence. And the emergence of a form of consciousness unconstrained by the physical and biological limits of linear time would generate an unprecedented ontological crisis. Consequently, these three elements are not merely separate forces but a complex feedback system. Time imposes limits. Technology seeks to overcome those limits, and consciousness must struggle to adapt to the accelerating pace of change. The quickening pace of technology is making our present more ephemeral than ever, turning yesterday's innovations into today's antiques in a matter of years. And this generates a collective sense of disorientation, a ceaseless future shock, where we constantly feel as if we are living in a permanent state of transition, never fully catching up with the speed at which the world is transforming. To counteract this imbalance, it is crucial that human consciousness learns to utilize technology consciously, not as a passive consumer but as an active creator, reclaiming autonomy over its time and attention, establishing boundaries between the digital and the physical worlds, and seeking out those quiet, uninterrupted spaces where deep contemplation and inner development can flourish. Because only in those moments of stillness can we distinguish between the transient noise of the information flow and the deep, persistent call of life's purpose. And ultimately, this complex linkage is not just a story of progress, but also a warning. For while we achieve near-divine capabilities through technology, we are simultaneously facing unprecedented existential challenges, from climate change to the risk of nuclear war, all amplified by the speed and connectivity of technological systems, and thus, the evolution of consciousness is no longer a philosophical luxury, but a survival imperative, compelling us to develop the wisdom, empathy, and ethical vision to manage the power we have unleashed, ensuring that the expansion of our technological power does not exceed our capacity for moral self-awareness, and that in the relentless race against time, we do not lose the core essence of our humanity, an essence defined not by the speed at which we act or the volume of information we consume, but by the depth of our understanding, the quality of our relationships, and the ability to find meaning and beauty in the brevity and fragility of our own finite existence. For it is in the recognition of time's finiteness that we truly come to appreciate the gift of consciousness and the immense power of technology to shape the legacy we leave behind. However, the current trajectory suggests that humanity is merely accelerating towards a point of ontological rupture, where the relationship between these three pillars will be fundamentally and irreversibly broken, pushing consciousness into a post-human, potentially non-biological existence that redefines what it means to be. And this impending singularity, the point where artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence, leading to runaway growth, promises a revolution in time itself. As digital thought processes, unconstrained by the slow chemical reactions of the brain, could perceive subjective time at vastly increased rates, potentially experiencing thousands of years of subjective reality within a single objective day, raising the question of whether an existence perceived at such an incomprehensible speed would still hold meaning, or if the sheer velocity of experience would flatten emotional and spiritual depth into an endless, high-frequency stream of data points. The promise of mind uploading, a transhumanist aspiration, encapsulates this entire nexus, offering to detach the conscious self from its biological timekeeper, thus achieving a form of digital immortality. Yet this solution introduces a profound philosophical dilemma. Is the uploaded consciousness truly you, or merely a perfect non-sentient copy, a mere computational echo of the biological original? And if the latter, the quest for immortality becomes a subtle, tragic self-deception, where the original consciousness still succumbs to time while its digital shadow lives on indefinitely, creating a temporal paradox where the self is both infinite and utterly finite, further exacerbated by the potential for simulated reality, where an entire existence, indistinguishable from our own, could be run within a technological framework, making the linear flow of time entirely arbitrary, subject to the whims of the simulation's architects, who could pause, rewind, or fast-forward entire epochs, dissolving the concept of objective history and plunging conscious experience into a permanent state of ontological doubt. A profound existential vertigo, where the reality of the past and the certainty of the future are forever undermined by the possibility of a simple software update. This extreme acceleration and decoupling of time from biology also feeds the growth of chronosocial inequality, turning the duration of life itself into the ultimate luxury commodity, where advancements in gene editing and molecular repair, the technological countermeasures to time's decay, are distributed unevenly, creating a stark societal division between the accelerated immortals or the extenders and the naturally finite, a schism that transcends mere economic class and becomes a fundamental difference in temporal status, where the super-long-lived elite view time, attention, and effort vastly differently from their short-lived counterparts, leading to incomprehensible ethical quandaries regarding resource allocation, political power, and cultural stagnation, as institutions designed for a short-lived species struggle to function under the weight of semi-immortal leadership and generations that never fully pass the torch, thereby altering the social contract itself and making the collective unconscious, the repository of shared human experience and moral judgment, increasingly fragmented and polarized across temporal lines. The psychological toll of this temporal dissonance is immense, leading to widespread temporal dysphoria, a collective anxiety stemming from the feeling that one's personal, human pace is fundamentally incompatible with the hyperspeed rhythm of the technological world, manifesting in phenomena like pervasive stress, attention deficit epidemics, and a crippling inability to commit to long-term goals in a world where the speed of obsolescence makes future planning feel futile, forcing the conscious self to retreat into immediate, high-stimulation feedback loops that offer temporary relief from the relentless pressure of constant technological update. Simultaneously, the rise of persistent, immersive virtual reality, VR, and the metaverse further complicates the time-consciousness relationship, as these digital environments allow for the creation of completely new, non-Euclidean spaces where the physics of time and causality can be arbitrarily manipulated, offering users the ability to spend years of subjective time in a virtual world while only hours pass in the physical world, creating distinct digital identities and virtual memories that become as salient, or perhaps even more salient, than their physical counterparts, thereby dissolving the objective reference point for reality, leading to a new form of digital embodiment where the self exists in a multiplicity of temporal states, stretching the concept of identity to its breaking point and necessitating a philosophical framework that can accommodate a consciousness that is both here and nowhere, now and always. The creation of such complex, persistent virtual worlds also challenges our understanding of memory retention, as the cognitive load of managing multiple temporal narratives, the physical life, the virtual lives, the historical data streams, pushes the brain to its limits, potentially leading to a societal memory crisis where true, deep historical knowledge is lost in the sheer volume of real-time disposable information, turning history into a commodity subject to instant revision and algorithmic recommendation, further eroding the shared factual basis necessary for collective ethical action. This pervasive digital presence demands a radical reevaluation of attention itself, recognizing that attention is the true scarce resource of the 21st century, and that the conscious effort to control one's focus, to choose deep, slow mode over broad, fast mode, is becoming a fundamental act of philosophical resistance against the technological temporal complex that seeks to monetize every sliver of our free mental space. The answer to this crisis of temporal disorientation and fragmented consciousness must therefore be found not in more technology, but in a profound intentional return to slow consciousness and digital asceticism, a movement that recognizes the ethical imperative of presence, advocating for the deliberate reduction of computational velocity in one's life, re-establishing the primacy of embodied experience and organic sensory input. The feeling of the earth beneath one's feet, the taste of slowly prepared food, the unhurried depth of face-to-face conversation, as necessary anchors in a hyper-accelerated world. This intentional slowness is not a nostalgic retreat, but a forward-looking strategy, a radical act of self-reclamation that allows the conscious self to integrate the vast, accelerating streams of information into a coherent, meaningful narrative rather than being swept away by them. The practice of deep reflection, meditation, and unmediated, unstructured time becomes the new frontier of personal resistance, a refusal to allow the technological apparatus to dictate the rhythm of the soul, effectively creating pockets of inner time that operate on a human scale, acting as psychological sanctuaries against the incessant pull of external acceleration. Ultimately, the destiny of human consciousness hinges upon this conscious choice, whether to passively submit to the relentless, algorithmically driven acceleration of time and the resulting fragmentation of the self, or to actively cultivate the wisdom, self-control, and ethical clarity required to wield the immense power of technology without sacrificing the human essence. The challenge for the next century is not merely technological, inventing faster chips or longer lifespans, but profoundly existential and moral. To ensure that as we expand our temporal dominion and technological prowess, our spiritual and ethical capacity expands even faster, allowing us to manage the singularity and the potential for digital eternity with compassion, humility, and a renewed appreciation for the precious, finite, and beautiful constraint that biological time has always imposed, reminding us that true value lies not in how long we exist, but in how deeply we choose to live and connect within the boundaries that define our unique human moment in the boundless flow of existence, cementing the fact that consciousness, when wisely managed, is the ultimate mediator between the relentless arrow of time and the transformative hammer of technology, guiding humanity towards a future of meaning, not merely speed.